topic here.
Hello, everybody, and we're here with a special for our audio escapades. And I have, well, our guest is Mark Brisenden. He is adapter and writer, comedy writer, and he did Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel, adapted the original scripts from the Marx Brothers from the early 1930s. And they were played in it was 1990, I think it started, wasn't it? On BBC Radio 4.
Yeah, so we did the pilot in 90, and yeah, I think 1991 we did the series because as you said, the book came out at the beginning of '89, and it's really quite funny because I can know exactly when and where I bought it because I found my receipt for the book the other day. I was having to clear some. I was having to clear some cupboards out, and I just pulled down this huge sort of laundry bag, and it just turned out to be all my, inland rents or something like that. So, and '89 just moved from a flat, I'd thrown them all in a bag, and 89 happened to be there. So I thought, and I just clicked through to February '89, and there is a receipt for a copy of Punch magazine that I bought, and then the following day I have a receipt for a book called Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel, bought in Liberty's Pan Bookshop in Liberty's, which used to be there, and so I claimed for it on my in loan because it was work-related expense, and so so I was there, and it was Dick Vosper who wrote the review of the publication of the book in Punch magazine, which is and I was not a regular reader, but I just was writing for the magazine at the time as well, and I said, wow, I mean, it's like it was one of these sort of bolt from the blue things because. As far as I was concerned, I don't think I'd ever heard of the show. Though when subsequently I went back over the Marx Brothers books I did have, I found a few mentions, and I thought, but it literally was just a few in there sort of past. There is in Joe Adamson's book about Groucho, Harpo Chico, and sometimes Zeppo. It's there, and I think, but I can say this was like you guys would know. This was 1989. It's a thing called the internet did not exist. You didn't just go and Google. Your keyboard and Google. I was still using a manual typewriter, and I had a few books about the Marx Brothers, and I'd read others from libraries. But obviously, in England, we just didn't have that kind of access to the kind of material about the Marx Brothers and the Marxes that you would have in the States. So yeah, so it was quite a surprise, and I read them and.
So that was your first experience with these, and how did you get connected to adapting them for BBC Radio 4?
Because that's where I was working at the time. I've been writing for about 4 or 5 years on starting Fringe Theatre, and then I started to. We had sort of BBC Radio 2 and 4 back then. Broadcast quite a lot of comedy shows, and a lot of them were quite regular shows, things like the News Headlines, starring a comedian called Roy Hudd, and then Weekending was another long-running topical comedy show that went out every Friday night, and so I started to contribute jokes and ideas to these, and then started to go to the meetings, and I got commissioned as a full-time writer on a couple of these shows. And they also had a thing called a contract writer. Every year, two or three or four writers were picked to be sort of contract writers, and you were given a specified amount a week, and then you just wrote for whatever show they wanted you to write for. I won't mention the amount now because it's ridiculous. It was a nice sort of thing. It kind of gave you sort of guarantee work, and they kind of make you feel that they were looking for you to contribute ideas and stuff like that. And so. When I did my interview for this contract job, I mentioned the scripts of Flywheel as something I would like to do if I was, doing the job. And it's a bit odd, really, as you said, to want to adapt radio scripts for radio is a bit kind of think, should I, what's going to be the response? But I'd done a show earlier in the year on another long-running sketch show called Nightcap, which was a Radio 2 show presented by a DJ. And it's a mix of comedy and songs and interviews. And they used that, and I did a little sort of my first sort of old time radio tribute show, if you like. I revived Death Rides the Airwaves, featuring the strange Dr. Weir, and I called it featuring the return of the strange Dr. Weir because I loved the concept so much, and I loved the idea. And I had an album that I'd found in a charity shop, and I wrote to the record company that had put it out. I think it was Sandy Hook Records, maybe, and said, can I do this? Are there any rights issues here? Because I'd love to just sort of revive. Because I love Death Rides the Airwaves, the strange stuff, and they were like sort of portmanteau horror stories. I mean, you may know the show, and so I wrote kind of parody versions of these, and as part of that show, and with the idea that we had found these dusty discs in the bowels of the BBC somewhere that hadn't been heard in 50 years, and so we kind of pretended that it was a kind of and that was produced also by Dirk Maggs was producing that at the time, and so he produced those as part of the show. And then so I thought, so I suggested that we offer the BBC. They had a thing called the Program Direction Group. You submitted ideas to them to see whether they wanted to commission a pilot, a series, or something like that. And so we put the idea of Flywheel into them to sort of revive them with the modern day cast doing Groucho and Chico, and because of course the main reason is that there were no known copies of the original to exist at the time. They thought that all the discs had been lost forever. Nat Perry himself, who was the only survivor by that point of the original show, and one of the creators, and he had no idea of any recordings. One did turn up, and there's also now, but funny enough, at the same time, I didn't realize, and I've only just known him now through Facebook and others. There's a guy called John F. Tefteller, who's a great radio collector, collector of audio archive and particularly the Marx Brothers, who worked for Groucho towards the end of his life as recording. He did a lot of work for him at that time. And he apparently now, over the years, he's been tracking them down, and in fact, he has 11 original recordings.
Wow.
Now, and he's trying to ready them. It's been a couple of times in the news, I think, and he's desperately trying to. He's an editor as well, and it's a sound recorder, so he's he's trying to clean them up as much as he can, and then hopefully he will be able to release them sometime next year with a book and about the Marx Brothers radio career in the 1930s, including 11 episodes of Flywheel, which is amazing. But the funny thing is, I've known about.
How many were there originally? I know you have 18 in your production.
There were originally 26 shows in this. They did one season of the thing, and 25 of the scripts were discovered. Episode 21 is still missing. Has never surfaced. And it's funny, and they did one sort of season with Groucho and Chico, obviously, and whilst for the next movie, I think it was Horse Feathers. I think they were waiting for the next movie to be written effectively, and then they did 26 shows, and then the Groucho said that the reason for doing any more Flywheels at the time is that the show was so successful, SO felt guilty taking the money and cancelled the series. But I think the real reason is that it was a hit. It wasn't a complete misfire, but it didn't get the greatest of ratings. And I think they were just ready to go back to Hollywood and start the next movie. But yeah.
So when you had your interview and you said you wanted to adapt the scripts, were you then just left alone to do that, or what sort of generally was the process, and how long was it before they actually started production?
Well, the first thing to do, once they decided that they would do a pilot, because strangely enough, it wasn't sort of universal. You think it would be a great idea to have but the producers both now dead, Harry Thompson and Jonathan James Moore, who really thought that this was a good idea, giving it a go. The head of the department at the time was a guy, Martin Fisher, wasn't so sure, because again, it was like an old thing, and as you well know, any kind of Marx kind of pastiche or parody of it, lives or dies on the quality of the impressions,
Yeah.
So, but they decided to give us a pilot, at least, which is one show, and then the head of the BBC contracts department, a woman called Lana Hensler, then had to basically get the rights from Pantheon Books, who published the book in the States, which I think at the time, I believe, but we got the to do that, and that's really because what I thought we would be just really going to sort of present these scripts really, and I thought that I'd have maybe a script editing job, but we then decided that I prepared a script. It's like, as I say, it's about the last thing I ever did on a manual typewriter, because I bought a word processor to do this, but I couldn't work out how to work it in time to get the script ready for the reading, so I had to do it. And then we got the cast together because when we decided that we would do this, we had to get people that were good enough to do it, and the only person I really knew that you could ask that was this guy called Dick Vosbrook, who'd written a show called A Day in Hollywood, A Night in the Ukraine, which featured, and the Night in the Ukraine thing, of course, is his great idea of what if Chekhov's The Bear was done by the Marx Brothers. So this is that. And so we asked him who he would recommend. And he recommended Michael Roberts to play Groucho Marx, who played it in Hollywood, Ukraine, and Frank Lash, who played Chico in Hollywood, Ukraine, and then also, was the musical composer for Hollywood, Ukraine. So we then got them. We got Frank and Mike and Dirk Cast and other friends, Graham Hoadley and Lorelei King, who was, and then Vincent was the right partner. So we had a read through it and worked out that without the kind of announcer statements, because this was sponsored by ESSO at the time, and so they had all these commercials. There'd be about 2 or 3 commercials in it, and intros and stuff like that. And without these, the script was about 17 minutes. So, I mean, I would have been quite happy to have put the ESSO Lube adverts in myself, having finished the original scripts and having finished in Goodnight Ladies every week. But it wasn't. Obviously, this was too far gone for that. And then, so we worked out that a modern Radio 4 or maybe BBC Radio comedy show would have about 24 minutes, including, because we decided to put a song in it as well. We could sort of take them up. I would have to sort of take bits of those to build it up into a 24-25 minute show, which is a BBC half hour with the song credits and announcers statements. The actual written content comes to about 25 minutes, but the show takes a slot. And so I thought, right, okay, that was more work than I thought I was going to have to do, and then it wouldn't just blend seamlessly. I would have to write in bits and pieces to join the bits and pieces together. So I thought, okay, well, now I've got to write for the Marx Brothers as well. But as you can hear from the first couple of series, I think the quality of the scripts throughout are really quite good. There are a couple that are a bit weak, and there are weaker moments. And then, as Nat and told me, they said, towards the end of the series, they were getting so tired they just basically nicked the plot of Monkey Business for one episode. And then there are other bits thrown in. Oh no, maybe it was Animal Crackers, something like that. But so that's when I literally set about, really trying to sort of fill it the best, put them together, and then, but I really wanted to use as much of the original material as I could, and that's what I set out to do, and that worked quite well for the first couple of series. And then when it came to the third, they asked me if there was enough left there, and I said, well, I've got 4 really good bits left that I've been saving in case we got a third, and then they allowed us to the third series, and then and I wrote about 2/3 of it, just to kind of, because I had to. There was nothing left. But I mean, sometimes there are others of that, and sometimes I feel a bit sort of guilty that I have to sort of dismantled them, you know. But they're there in book form, and anybody who wants to go and put a, you know, a little live theatre thing together, they can do the scripts as exactly as they were. But now also, I think that with John F. Tefto's, when it becomes available, it'll be great. You know, these things can live side by side. But as I said, we did them. The great thing about when the book was originally published in the States is that they talked to and discovered Nat Perrin, still around. He was 84 and in great shape and great form. And when Mark and Frank, they went on, when we announced that we were going to do this, the BBC were going to do this, there was a bit of there were some radio appearances and stuff. And then they did Pebble Mill at 1, a BBC lunchtime show that Mike and Frank went on and did their Groucho and Chicos, and they piped in an interview with Nat Perrin, and I thought to myself, well, that means somebody at the BBC must have his address, his phone number, and I thought, right, yeah, and then, you know, Dirk had it and rolled it, and then so I wrote to Nat saying how much, and he wrote, and the great day was one day I got this letter from, you know, and he wrote back to me, and then I arranged after the second, I think, was it before the second came out there, but in 1991, I went out and just went out there to LA and to visit him. You know, I mean, it was, you know, I don't know, it's still alive. He was 84, but you know, he's in good shape for an 84-year-old when I met him. So yeah, and he loved the show. He was just absolutely fabulous about it. He thought they were better than the originals.
Yeah, I did see that quote.
But I think, you know, it was. Yeah. And I mean, he was very sweet, and it was very nice of him. But it because he would said that, you know, I didn't have the you know, I think he was working with the real Marx Brothers.
Yeah,
and I'm sure they were a lot better on and a lot more demanding script-wise than my facsimiles were. So,
anyway,
yeah,
Mark here has, I think, has a question too, because the internet or the connection is not the greatest, so it's hard to hear sometimes.
Yes, you mentioned the music and the song in the episodes. Are they Marx Brothers songs that you brought in, or are they original songs made for the episode?
For the most part, we started off by using the songs that were made in their movies, you know, as much as we could, and then sometimes there were one of the cast wanted to do a certain number. I mean, the classic in the third series is Gorgonzola. It's Frank Lazarus' choice. He just loved the song, and so do I now. We did use a couple of them. We used one of Dick Vosburgh's originals from Sing Me a Sense of Song. And then he also added some additional lyrics to a modern update we did of I've Got a Little List in the episode where they run a restaurant. And by and large, they were songs that were associated with the Marx Brothers in some way, like Show Me a Rose and things like that. And Life is So Peculiar is another one Groucho sings with Bing Crosby. And so, yeah, by and large. And also, there were some others. A writer called Glenn Mitchell, you may know him from the Marx Brothers Encyclopedia. And others. He made up a nice for us, and that's actually where we got Life So Peculiar from. He put that on a cassette as songs that would be good or might be good in Flywheel. So yeah, but by and large, they were the ones associated with the Marx Brothers, had been in their movies, or were just songs that, you know, because Mike and Frank obviously were not only brilliant at Groucho and Chico, they loved them. They loved them all their lives, and so their knowledge of, you know, the Marx Brothers that was very deep, and you know, they had things they naturally wanted to do.
Yeah, the thing that I find really interesting as well is that when Nat Perrin and Arthur, what is it, Sheikman? Yeah, when they wrote the originals, they sort of grabbed stuff from Animal Crackers and Emmanuel Ravelli, they took some of, well, they took his name from, I think, Animal Crackers, and then they took some of the scenes, and then when they did later films, they took some of the dialogue and put it in later films. And you, when you did this, didn't you take some from stuff that wasn't used from other films and put in as well as your own material?
No, it was one of those things that was a great surprise reading Flywheel for the first time and seeing these routines from Duck Soup turn up in them. And of course, obviously, so that, that was done. So they came, so you could absolutely guarantee, this was Nat and Arthur had written these lines or these routines in Duck Soup because they originally came from Flywheel. Although I think Nat did tell me they did take other writers on to help out at times. And I think Andrew T. Smith, who wrote this book, Re-Marx, about the making of the original shows, I think it was George Oppenheimer was in there, and another one, his name escapes me, Tom McKnight, who wrote episodes, who I found writing other episodes for The Shadow and Philip Marlowe. So but when the book came out, by and large, a lot of that has just been lost to the mists of time. So it was always, Nat and Arthur, who were the creators of the series and the main writers, probably 80% of it at least, I'm sure. So but no. I mean, there's one very fun instance in that I wrote a poem about Chico saying about a code and 2 pair of pants and stuff like that, which I thought was my line until I saw it in Horse Feathers. So, which is probably those S.J. Perriman or Wilbur Johnson or something like that. And so, I didn't want to just, when we did the pilot, we did that episode, and I took some of the Animal Cracker stuff that they put in the script. I thought if it's in the script, if it's in the book, if it's in the original scripts, I can use it. Okay. And so even though I knew it was Animal Crackers and stuff, but we were it was like a form of insurance because we did the pilot and we didn't know whether we would get a series from it. So I tried to use the kind of the strongest material, and I thought, well, let's remind everybody of the great Animal Crackers stuff. And I think it's in the book, I can use it, and so yeah. But as you see, we got a pilot, and they commissioned the first series, and they liked it, and then we thought, so yeah. But I was trying to kind of hedge my bets a bit. I was trying to use the best,
Yeah, and
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I'm curious about Spike Milligan. To be honest, I mean, how did he get involved? Was he approached, or did he approach you? Was he a fan of the Marx Brothers? How did he?
It's a happy coincidence because another friend of mine, again, passed away last year, a guy called Michael Poynton, who was a researcher and a writer, and he was doing a documentary about the Goons for radio, and coincidentally also being produced by Dirk. So Mike went down to interview Spike, obviously, and then Dirk went to record it, for edit and broadcast. And that's where he said how much he was enjoying the Wild series, and apparently he had this one burning ambition that was to, because he loved Groucho. Groucho was his comic idol, and he said his one ambition was to work with the Marx Brothers before he died. So we were able to make his dreams come true.
Really?
Yeah.
No,
that was it. Yeah, no, he just loved it. Yeah. And he was wonderful. He was great. And
were you there with all the recordings? And the reason why I asked that is because it seems that Michael Roberts and Frank Lazarus, they ad-libbed a lot. Was that sort of them totally ad-libbing, or was this stuff as they were doing it that you changed and added for them as it went on?
No, we had no process like that. I adapted and wrote the scripts, and then they were sent to the cast, and we just met up on a Sunday. There was no kind of rewriting or anything at all. No, I mean, Mike is they've both done Groucho before. Again, Mike is Groucho is one of his great comic idols and his heroes, and is a fantastic. Apart from doing Groucho, Mike's a fantastic voice artist. He does all sorts of people, and he's got an incredible memory for old films and quoting bits of dialogue back at you, very quick with them, and Frank was too. So no, they were given full reign to ad lib if they wanted to. We didn't use all the bits and pieces, but it was great because there was a live audience there, and they just came out and they played to the audience. So if something just happened, or they would respond to that, and Spike too, and yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, because I wondered about that, because there is quite a bit of, or it seems like it's ad libbing, and if they didn't ad lib it, they did very well for the ad libbing, and yeah, between.
Well, I think that's a bit sort of because Mike and Frank would say, oh, I ad libbed this, and I would say to them, yeah, well, I ad libbed a few things too, because anything that's not in the original book is written by me, so. It's just that I did all my ad libs on my own at home, and
yeah,
and they didn't all work. No, no, and there are many that didn't get seen. Yeah. So no, it's funny because I found that I suffered in the same way that the original writers for them. Groucho is such a there are still people to this day that don't that there was script writers for You Bet Your Life. And Groucho, although he did not discredit them, he didn't allow it to be widely known that they had a team of writers on You Bet Your Life, because it was mainly him as a great. I know, not ever take anything away from Groucho as being a fantastically witty, funny human being, but he I think I'm a way that the Marx Brothers write it, because it says it like that. Groucho says it, but the thing that's a real trap to fall into, is thinking that almost Groucho says anything, it will be funny, because with the cigar and the way he says it, it will be funny, and it's that in a way is that towards the end of Groucho's career, he said he felt that people were just writing stuff that, and he would say it would be funny because Joe Marx. So everything that sort of had to be observed, but I think that is the beauty of you watch these films. That is the beauty of them. The timing was superb, and
Mark,
of course, we had
I have to ask, how's your Groucho impression?
Well, if it was any good, mine on the part. That's no, it's one of those things. I've got a cigar around here somewhere. I feel like I get the kind of it's a beautiful guy called Frank Ferranti, who does his Groucho Marx one man. And he sort of says that the first thing you do with Groucho is you get the shape. You get the kind of shape of Groucho and then the voice. But I get the intonation and the flow, but the life of me, I can't really do a decent Groucho at all. It's the bane of my existence.
Well, you've always got him over your shoulder there as well.
Oh yeah, well I mean this is one. Yeah, well, these guys here, I know they're Marx. They came from the Marx Brothers Festival in 2016 that Matthew Coney and Andrew T. White again set up, and we had a weekend in Bath where Matthew lives, and so they're still there. I mean, I've got that. No, but I mean, to my left here is a bookshelf covered in as many books as I could find or buy about the Marx Brothers there. So there's a lot of posters out in the hallway. But I'm not a great collector of ephemera and stuff like that. But no, that was a great weekend, and we had showed a couple of movies, had a few guests and stuff like that. And actually got to hear John F. Tefteller came on. He lives in the States, lives in Oregon, and he was piped in, and he played us a little 5-minute clip of a Flywheel that he'd been on, and it sounded fabulous because we had a little sort of 14-piece sort of orchestra, but they had a fantastic sort of full sort of swing band. You hear them sort of start up, the music, and they're kind of what was it? The sort of fade in out music was fantastic, all played by this big old band, like they had in the sort of golden age of radio, really. So, yeah.
So when they recorded these new ones, did they have? It was just recorded music that they played for the audience, or did they actually have people?
We've got a kind of, but it was. I think we got a kind of like I think 14, 15 piece orchestra at the times were there, but they didn't really. It was more of a kind of a Radio 2 sounding orchestra of the time of the period, almost like a parlor court orchestra than a really big, full-on, swinging band. Because I mean, if you imagine this is 32, 33, the originals were recorded in the swing era. It was just coming into kind of its floor. And so many great things were happening in American entertainment at that time. And so I didn't really feel that they kind of approximated that. But that's just my opinion.
Now, because it was in front of a audience. Because it was in front of a live audience when they were recorded, did Michael or Frank have props? Like, did Michael do the mustache and had a cigar as to get into the character?
Yeah. It was in full costume. It was in full costume, and Frank even had his own Chico costume already made up, with the hat and the beautiful.
Wow.
I mean, they looked as if they were straight off the Broadway stage. They were fabulous. And then the cast were asked and encouraged to dress in the period, and Lorelei would always have a wonderful gown on, and then Frank, Vincent, her husband, would again smart suit. Vincent would look like one of the big, the George Kennedy, the big dumb palooka from the comedy periods, the comic stooge of the era, and looked fantastic in a sharp pinstripe suit. And Graham would often wear a DJ as well, and the orchestra were smartly attired. Yeah, so because that's what it is. We wanted people to look at page, and this is 1933. This is a time capsule. Here we are. And like you said, it's as close as I'll ever get to seeing Marx Brothers work in that era. And there were times when Mike and Frank and the script picked up, and the shows with Dick Rosberg, I think, and Spike, just worked well. And there were just moments I was just sitting there thinking I could have died and gone to heaven. I'm in New York in 1933, and I'm watching a recording of Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel. I thought they were great. Yeah. So it was it was as much a recreation of the period that we could make.
Is there any video? Is there any video of this? Did anybody capture any of it?
We shot an amateur video on the night of the pilot, which is not, but it had to kind of be done statitiously, so it had to be sort of done behind a thick recording booth screen, stuff like that. And it's not. I have a copy of it, but it's not very good. It's a great shame. I asked, I would hope, because when we had Spike Milligan coming down to do the show, we recorded them at the Paris Studios, which is very famous BBC recording studio. Now, sadly, and the idea I asked that, because we've got Dick Rosberg, I said, is there any way that we could film these shows, as well as, because there's a lot of copyright issues and a lot of payment. Obviously, if you did all that, you'd have to pay the orchestra like that. But I said, well, we could get the orchestra off. They can come on, play the songs. Then they get up, and then we just filmed. But I asked Dirk, and they came back and they said there was nothing in the budget. There was nothing in the budget for doing this. So it would have been great, because it turned out, of course, to be Spike Milligan's swan song at the Paris Studios, because this is where he recorded the Goons as well. You see. And apart from one appearance where he came in to do a documentary or an interview at the Paris, that was his last appearance at the Paris Studios, working with the Marx Brothers. So it's quite a punchline, quite an ending.
So
yeah.
Do you then have sort of, I guess, the copyright for the scripts that you've done and everything? What I'm thinking is it would be lovely to see a companion book to this with your scripts.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, I'm sorry to pit them off a little while. I'm in the tropics of Pimlico, central London at the moment. It's we've had a heat wave, and we have a discussion with that, because obviously now, because the book, when the scripts were discovered, they were what was known as in the public domain, because the copyright on them hadn't been renewed. when they went into the book form with Michael Boss, and then, but now with the BBC ones, they're the copyright or the rights of myself and Bearman, and Dick Bosborough has rights, and obviously in the material he contributed. So I mean, I would love that. I was when we were going to do the CD. The CD. I was always wondered that we could put maybe like a chapter or an article or something with the sleeve notes and make that a bigger thing. But the BBC, as I said, they didn't have to ask my permission to release the CD, and so they just put it out with they just put them in a jewel case and some notes and a picture, and that was that. But I had discussed, because this guy Andrew T. Wright, who wrote the book, let me see if I can just quickly grab it down for you. Here we go. This is the book, Andrew. Can I get that in focus somehow? Yep. No, I'm not lucky here, am I?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
There it is, yeah.
It's backwards, it's mirrored, but never mind. Anyway, it's Marx and Re-Marx, Creating and Recreating the Lost Marx Brothers radio series by Andrew T. Smith. And he was going to do, hopefully one day, he was going to do a new edition. And there was some talk that we might that. And it's a money thing, really, because I wouldn't mind doing that, but it's a money thing really about who will actually buy. Would it be financially sort of viable enough to sort of to do that with the new script?
Well,
so
with print on
the short
demand,
answer is would be nice.
Print on demand, you could do it that way, so there's not a lot of outlay, and you could do it as print on demand, write a good introduction, essays, your take on it.
Yeah, well, there's one thing is that if you want, you can find a book, Radio Scriptwriting. Here we go again, Radio Scriptwriting, and that is edited by Sam Boardman. I contributed a chapter to that about writing comedy for radio, and a lot of it is about. And my chapter is called Flywheel, Shyster and Me. Is my and I wrote about doing Flywheel as well as how to write other sketch shows and stuff. So so there's a bit there. So I've got some other stuff that's lying around that I wanted to do. So it was doable and might happen. A bit like So
Yeah, because well, the thing is, because publisher or who would possibly take this as well is Bearman or Media.
Yeah, well, I think it's Bearman that did Andrew's book, and I know that Matthew Coniam has written stuff for them as well. He's another great Marx Brothers scholar, and I mean, it's you're not saying anything I haven't thought of before. So
well, I want to see it. Yeah. I want the book. I want the scripts, and I want your story for the whole thing. Right, that's what I want. I'm selfish here.
The print on demand is not a bad idea. Yeah. I must think about that some more.
But and the other thing that's funny, I'm not sure if people who know the series and know the Marx Brothers probably know that the original, it was Beagle, Shyster and Beagle. Doesn't quite have the same gravitas. And funny, I guess a lawyer Beagle called in and said, "I'm going to sue you if you don't change."
So I mean, it's great, isn't it? Because Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? It's a great title.
Yeah.
And so there are all sorts. I mean, that's the nice thing about that book is that there's an interview with Nat Perrin in there as well, and there's good articles written about the original series. So it's a great. I got about 4 copies at the moment. Still.
Yeah.
Because the funny thing is that. Okay. As I said, I think the book is actually went out of print before we even started to do the second series. That's strange.
Oh wow.
And then Pantheon was swallowed up by Warner Brothers, I think, something like that. Yeah. It's very weird over here because
I've been looking for a better copy because mine's been chewed at, but it's been well read. But I also want to get the other there now.
It's funny that I've got 3 copies I can see right now. One of them was the one I bought to do the series from, and then one I took from a friend's place who was effects I was hoping to clear up, and then one of the edition, which I think I discovered there was a stack of them in a shop in the West End one time. But I think it's pretty easy to get on the internet now, on eBay and Amazon and stuff. Yeah, it was nice sort of edition. Well done, yeah.
Yeah, well,
that was the funny thing, because again, I bought the 2 copies I've ever seen, because when I needed, I went to, as I say, there was Pan Bookshop in Liberties, which is on Regent Street near the BBC Casting House, and so I went and I bought, and there was like 2 copies of this book, Flywheel. I mean, so I bought one, and then the next one I bought for Derek when he wanted. So I can safely say I literally bought the only 2 copies of Flywheel that I ever saw in there. So
wow.
I'm not sure it was a big seller over here, or they had a big print run, because that was it. And I don't remember it because I used to go to Foyles. I mean, again, it was in the day in the West End. You had Foyles was the big West End bookshop. I can't even remember whether Waterstones were around then, or because they all came in, Borders and Books, etc. And of course they all went in the recession, I think in the late 90s or whatever. They're all TK Maxx's and Primarks now. But Foyles has moved down the road a bit. But yeah, no, I mean, I never. It was one of those things that surprised me that there was no hoo-ha. I mean, that, as I said, I just quite by chance read a review in Punch magazine, and Dick Bosborough, I think, was a fairly regular contributor to Punch, and obviously wanted to do it because he's a Marx Brothers fan. And that's funny because that reminds me of a story that surprised me many years earlier, because about 5 years before I did Flywheel, I was that longer, I was living it, and I went to see in the afternoon the W.C. Fields was at the Everyman Cinema in Hampstead, and which is like, as you say, in the days before, even before VHS and stuff like that.
Yeah,
this is what you did. You went from one side of London to the other just to see a couple of people. And I was in there, and it's quite sort of Sunday afternoon, sparsely attended, but sat right in front of me, about 5 rows in front of me, with Dick Bosborough and Spike Milligan, whom I both recognised because I'd seen them. Dick had been on TV a fair bit as well, and Milligan. And I thought, wow, but I didn't have that. I didn't go up and say hello. I didn't have that kind of moxie. But I reminded them when I met them, and in fact, I met Dick Bosborough a few times before he did Flywheel. But when I met them both together, I reminded them, and Spike just said the same thing. He said, "Yeah, well, that's what you have to do. If you wanted to see, W.C. Fields film back then, and somebody put them on and it was so, he even if like I said, pre-internet and all that kind of thing, even if you were Spike Milligan, you couldn't get to see W.C. Fields whenever you wanted to."
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite ironic that they were at that screening, and then I met them. And then got to work with both of them in Flywheel all those years later. Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, no, it's great that I'm really enjoyed this. It's really good, and I hope you'll come back and we can talk about something else again. Maybe a little more Marx Brothers in films. How would that be?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fun. I mean, it's what all brought us together. I mean, when I met Mike Roberts and Frank, and then there was another guy, again, names I've mentioned before, Glenn Mitchell and Michael Poynton, and again, sort of Dick Bosborough. They were all but through meeting them, I realized that we'd been in the same cinema many times, watching old Marx Brothers films. We're all incredible Marx Brothers buffs. We've all gone to see all-night screenings, in Scala Cinema, in King's Cross, or And so, you know, it's amazing how, but we'd never met. And it was one of the nice things was Glenn Mitchell and Michael Boynton. Glenn's still around. They became very good friends of mine, and I met them all through doing Flywheel, you know, because they were such huge Marx Brothers fans, you know. So it was, you know, and as I said, I struck up a correspondence with Nat, and I met him, and I sent him every copy of the show on cassette myself, and then sadly I would have, you know, got out to LA, but Nat, I think, lived another about 93, I think, lived another 7 or 8 years, and also Arthur Sheetman's widow, because Arthur Sheetman was married to Gloria Stewart, the film star and the Titanic lady, is very famous. And she was still alive, and she carried on. She lived till she was 100, and I never got to meet her, but the BBC stringer in LA interviewed her several times, and I used to send. So Gloria got all the tapes as well through me, and she loved them, and she used to listen to them with her grandchildren. So you know, we got some great feedback from Mark's beauty and family for them, you know. So yeah.
Well, I've always said, and I've said it to you before, that to me, this series is one of the best sort of modern, like within the last 50 years of radio, I think. There's a few others that are great as well, but there's not many. Because this has the feel of old time radio. That's the one thing. It, like, you know, a lot of newer new time radio or whatever doesn't have the feel of the old shows, but this really does. And you know, it's I think that, and it's the melding of everything too, and knowing that these are impersonators doesn't deter from it. It makes it more interesting, I think, because they have their own nuances and they enhance some of the quirks that Chico and Groucho had, and build on them.
I think it was because I think of the sort of people where everybody the core of us had the same sort of interests, and Mike and Frank we were the right age, and even with Dick Bosbury, he could remember when he was a child, you know, ill in bed listening to The Shadow on the radio. So you know, he had sort of linked back to that era, and Spike as well. They were you know, effectively raised on radio, some of them.
Yeah.
And so they're all sort of historians of the way in their own right, you know, and Graham as well. The one thing that they did, I mean, is that they would do, like Graham in particular would they would pick, you know, an old sort of Hollywood movies, you know, they were such good voice artists. They wouldn't just do, if you had an angry landlord, like I heard the angry landlord, he wasn't just some sort of generic angry German, you know. He picked it wasn't Ruben. I always forget the name of the other actor he's actually doing. It's so frustrating, that slipped from my mind again. But you know, they picked these lovely names, you know, and so they weren't just, half the time, you know, it didn't matter if you didn't know who the original actor was, but if you did, then it added something extra to you, you know, to your enjoyment of it. Yeah.
Definitely.
Do you have any other questions, Mark?
I mean, the thing is, I'll probably think of something once it's over, but I asked the big ones I wanted to ask already. Thanks.
Yeah. No, this has been great. Sorry, it's the connection is difficult.
Yeah, sometimes a little delay, but it's been great. I mean, you know, if you want, we can do sort of. I'm happy to come back and you know,
definitely
have a chat.
Definitely.
And then also, you know, during this, what you should definitely also do, you chat with this guy John F. Teftel. I'll send you his details. I'm sure he'd love to do this. Yeah. And then Andrew T. Smith as well, who wrote the book. I'm sure he'd be most happy to to chat.
Yeah, no, that would be great. Yeah. I was going to pick your brain for that after we done recording here, so stick around.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll chat for a few more minutes if that's okay.
Yeah.
But we'll end we'll end the recording here, and definitely we'll have Mark back at some other time. And because I want to pick your brain more about other things. But thanks everybody, BookTube, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.